I've always had an interest in getting involved in research that can make a positive difference to the world around us. What we established is that there's a drug called LY41575 that displayed transmission blocking potential in the malarial parasites. Actually, with the rise of AI, it's even more interesting to consider how important emotional intelligence is. A lot of people don't realise how much of a role it plays in our everyday lives. I lead a group called Active at Addenbrooke, which is the Children and Young People's Board. We aim to take on projects to improve children's services in the hospital. I think it's just so rewarding to be able to give back to the community. You can't ever reach perfection, but you can believe in an asymptote towards which you're ceaselessly striving.
With over 250 million people affected by malaria globally each year, today's guest chose to focus on malaria eradication for her recent research project with Cambridge University. Versha, congratulations on winning the prestigious Gull Crest Award. Tell me about your research.
Well, first of all, thank you. And I did a research project into anti-malarial interventions. So I looked at both some sort of practical procedures and scientific testing in the lab to test different drugs that might have transmission blocking potential. But then part of my project was also more sort of literature review based, and I was looking at existing research and trying to see how we can maximize the efficiency of existing interventions as well. So I did that first as a lab placement at the Cambridge University Department of Pathology. And that was a really enjoyable and valuable experience because it was one of my first times doing practical work myself in a lab. And it was full of some really valuable resources, and I was able to speak with people in the field. So that was a really insightful experience.
What made you want to do that and look into that particular field?
So I've always had an interest in getting involved in research that can make a positive difference to the world around us. And that is a huge aim. So I think it's important to appreciate that even if it's something really small, no matter how small the difference is, I'm really passionate about doing what I can. And with this project, I didn't really go into it thinking that I was going to be able to reach an outcome that could be applied in the real world. It was more for myself. I wanted to experience the world of research and get that opportunity in my hands. But actually, I was really grateful to be able to come to conclusions that can now be applied as well.
So tell me about that. That's so exciting with so many people, like 250 million people a year being impacted by malaria.
The discovery that I made, it's still very much in the process of development, and it wasn't all me by any means. There are many researchers working very hard in that lab. The group that I worked for is called the Blackburn Group, and they're still doing research. They have been for years. So the credit really does lie with them, but I'm really grateful to have been able to join them. So what we established is that there's a drug called LY41575 that displayed transmission blocking potential in the malarial parasites, which essentially means that it inhibited the further replication of parasites. And that's really valuable because it means that rather than just focusing on making anti-malarials and drugs to prescribe people once they've already been infected with malaria, we can actually stop the transmission of the parasite before it gets between different mosquitoes. So if we've got less mosquitoes or fewer mosquitoes that are infected with the malaria parasites, over subsequent years, we'll have fewer cases. And so that will help with the eventual control or even eradication of malaria altogether.
We'll definitely watch that with interest to see what happens. You've done a lot of research at the Perse, haven't you? I was thinking back to when you were in year 10 and you did some research on the link between health and emotional intelligence. What a fascinating area.
It is definitely a fascinating area. And I think actually with the rise of AI, it's even more interesting to consider how important emotional intelligence is, because I think a lot of people don't realize how much of a role it plays in our everyday lives. And given my interest in medicine, I did want to look at the role of health in relation to that. But actually, I focused on different aspects of health. So not just physical health. I looked at social health and as in sort of social well-being in that sense, and mental health. And even I looked at financial health, and I found that some of the highest performing jobs are those that really do require a high level of emotional intelligence. So there are some really interesting links to be drawn there. And I did conclude overall that having a high emotional intelligence is something that will serve you really well in later life. And there were some arguments that disagreed with it. There are psychologists who argue that emotional intelligence is a fraud concept. It doesn't exist. But I think the overwhelming majority view is in favour of it and its influence in our lives.
Wow. I want to come and talk to you about some of your volunteering work now. Fascinating volunteering that you're doing at Addenbrooke. Tell me about that.
So I lead a group called Active at Addenbrooke, which is the Children and Young People's Board. And we aim to take on projects to improve children's services in the hospital. So just recently, we've been creating a podcast series where we've taken some patient feedback and are now feeding that back to staff in a way that's presentable to them. And we've also been involved in a lot of public events, so community outreach events. We're trying to plan one for the sickle cell disease community. And I think that's been a really valuable experience, just getting to know the healthcare system a little bit better and meet different healthcare workers.
What motivated you to want to give up your time in an already very busy schedule to do that?
I think it's just so rewarding to be able to give back to the community, just for yourself, but also for the people you're doing it for. It really makes everything you're doing feel much more fulfilling that way if you know that there's purpose behind what you're doing and you're getting stuff out of giving back, but you're also giving to people and improving their lives and their experiences.
Well, good luck with the rest of that. That sounds so interesting. Back at the Perse, you're also involved in various different groups, for example, the Student Council. What kind of things have you been doing there?
So the Student Council is a very busy group. We've been involved in a lot of different projects. Recently, some of them include getting subject-specific feedback. So we've been working quite closely with Dr. Kimyak, giving feedback about the ways in which students learn best. We've also just changed caterers, so we've been getting a lot of feedback about the new catering, and it's been mostly positive, thankfully, but there's a lot to be improved on, as always. So there's always stuff going on with the Student Council. I think it's a very vibrant group, and I've really enjoyed it because you get to liaise with different staff members, you really develop your teamwork and leadership skills, and it's just so nice to get to know people in other year groups while also making a positive difference for the school.
And I understand you've also been working with our inclusion, equality and diversity team. What have you been doing?
We work with both staff and students for that. Last year I gave a talk at the staff training discussing some of the key issues that we had talked about in our IED sessions. And IED is a very rapidly growing group. We've now got Flourish and Femme Flourish sessions where we talk about gender-specific issues and just make sure that there's a platform where everyone can feel heard and these issues are much more normalised and we feel like we can openly discuss them. So I think that's been really valuable.
This year you were given the role of head of school, traditionally known as head girl. How has that been for you?
It's been amazing, to be honest. I'm really grateful for the experience. I think I've taken so much from it in terms of developing as a person with my leadership skills and the chance to interact with so many people that I don't think I would have had the opportunity to do so if I didn't have this role. I think it's been really valuable getting to know different people's thoughts and perspectives so that I can then feed that back to the head and to other senior members of staff to try and improve our school. One thing I've really enjoyed so far as well is the Wellington College Conference. That was recently last month, and it was such a cool opportunity to be able to meet other heads of school from as far afield as Paris even, and just see how other people's think, how they've been having their roles in their school and what sorts of things they get up to.
Were there some ideas you could steal from some other schools to bring back to the Perse?
I mean, definitely. I think the prefect systems over different schools are all very different. So it was interesting to see how different people run things. One thing that struck me is the different groups that they had prefects for. So in different schools, they maybe had more charity prefects, and there was more of a focus on giving back to the community. Or maybe in some schools, they had far fewer prefects than we did. And that's something interesting to consider as to what the reasons behind that might be.
Reflecting on your time more widely as a student at the Perse, what will you take to your next stage after you graduate the Perse and go on to university?
Well, I think the first thing to say is I'll definitely look back very fondly upon my time at the Perse, because it's developed me in so many more ways than just from an academic perspective. I think the Perse places a very good focus on a holistic educational experience, and I'm really grateful for that. I think there are so many extracurricular opportunities, so many research opportunities that I've been able to get involved with, and it's a very supportive environment. The staff and students alike are so friendly, and I think all of that I will be able to take with me in university and beyond, and that will really serve me well.
We always end our podcast asking our guests if there's a particular maybe motto or phrase or words of wisdom that they live by that they might want to pass on to other people. What's yours?
So actually, there's a book called When Breath Becomes Air that is to do with medicine. And so I was reading that in terms of my medical interest. It's by Paul Kalanithi, an American neurosurgeon. And in it, he says, "You can't ever reach perfection, but you can believe in an asymptote towards which you're ceaselessly striving." And that really resonated with me, because I think it quite rightly puts the emphasis on continuous effort and resilience rather than aiming for a fixed endpoint. I think that mindset is really important in remembering that failure is not everything, and it's our effort that we put in and our self-improvement that is what is really important.
Thank you.
Thank you.